Hello, welcome to the very first ever dice pool by Evil Hat. I'm Sean Nittner. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm very happy to be hosting this dice pool for Thirsty Sword Lesbians. We're going to be asking three amazing GMs their tips and tricks and strategies for making the most out of this game. And we're very much hoping that if this is a success, if everybody enjoys it, that we'll do more of these. This is an experiment for us. We're trying it out. I hope things go well. Please be patient and understanding if they do not. We'll work on it. A few things to note. We've got a limited amount of time and a ton of topics that we're going to cover. So each question is going to be answered by two of our fantastic GMs, and we're going to rotate through. And so we're going to have about 10 minutes per question. In this particular format, in the main show, we're not taking questions from the audience. But if you were one of the VIP backers and you are part of the fireside chat, you should have a link for that, which is it's available in Moonbeam, and we also sent an email of it. And in there, you'll be able to send questions to the GMs. Let's see. I think that's it. So I'm going to switch this up to introduce our GMs. Hello. Let's start with Lily and go across the board. Why don't you tell us your name, your pronouns, and just your background in Thirsty Sword Lesbians.
Yeah, of course. Hi, my name's Lily Eisner. My pronouns are she, her. I've been playing and running role-playing games for decade plus now. Thirsty Sword Lesbians in particular, basically since I saw it for the first time on itch.io, before it came out, as a whole cool, awesome book, back in 2020 or whenever it was. I played it and stuff, and then was running it. I've ran long-term games with most of the people here, one-shots with most of the people here. I ran some one-shots at Big Bad Con. I've been playing it basically since it was a thing that people could look at and see, and it's my favorite game. So yeah, I'm really excited to be here.
Awesome. How about you, Alexis?
Hi, I'm Alexis Sarah. My pronouns are she, her, and I've been playing TSL since it was in Evil Hat's testing phase. I fell in love with it right away when I read the book. I was like, oh my God, this is the first TTRPG that I read from front to back because it was just so much fun to get engaged with the book. And then I ran multiple sessions, and then the setting I made for all the sessions I was running one shots in a server. I made a setting. I ended up putting that into the book, and I worked on User Evolution and then the Matriarch playbook. I've been running campaigns since then, basically running one shots. I've been playing so much. I might be the person who's GM'd the most TSL.
I think you are, Alexis. From what I've heard from April, whenever I talk to her, I'm like, wow, Alexis runs a lot of games.
Yeah, I've run at least 400 games of TSL, I think, something like that. So,
yeah, you get an award.
I think
you have an award. You've got an Any, right? You've got a.
Yeah, I do. In fact, I did get an Any for working on TSL.
Yeah,
wow.
Well deserved. Well deserved. How about you, Anthony?
So my name's Anthony Nomo, they, them, and I had the privilege of playing and running Thirsty Swords Lesbians for April back in 2019. And yeah, fell in love with it. Incredible game. And then the book came out with all the art. I was like, it could be better. I didn't think it could be better.
Yeah, right.
It's my go-to Powered by the Apocalypse game for sure. I've definitely run long campaigns. I've played one-shots. I've run a bunch of stuff. But usually when I run any sort of home game, I do a collection of different types of games, like micro games and other stuff. But TSL is always part of that roster.
That's so good to hear. I love that it's I love that it's such a go-to game. There's sometimes where you're like, well, we could play this game, but it's going to be so much work to get started, or I have to really rally people, and I love it. Or we can play TSL. That's just all on the table. All right. So everybody watching, the format of the show is we got a couple general questions that are sort of game agnostic, the general practice questions, and then all of our GMs submitted topics that they want to talk about, and so we can go through those as well. So Alexis, I'm going to start with you. We talked about one shots, and we talked about long campaigns. What is your best tip or trick or strategy for running a really tight one shot session in a convention game or on a stream?
I think the best tip to a one shot is, that palette phase. The palette's really great. It was a great innovation on like the normal lines and veils. So what am I excited to see in that one shot? That is like key. Hone in,
Nice.
jamming, like on what I'm excited to see. Hit those and then really pay attention to the smittens. Because for a one shot, like the best feeling in the world in a one shot is like, I got the girl, right? I got the person that I was into. So when you hit that, when I'm smitten, and then you know that like it's going to lead to that, and you get the big dramatic kiss at the end, or a traumatic like, no, they're working for the enemy, right? So hit those smittens, hit them hard, and then they will remember the one shot. They will probably want it to be a campaign.
I can only imagine how many one shots you've run that people are like, can we play? Can we play again? Can we play more?
Just one more time.
Yeah. Anthony, what about you? What's your tactic?
I want to follow up and just like reemphasize like the smitten move. Like the thing that really brings me back to Thirsty Sword Lesbians over any other PBTA game is smitten. Truly, because in general, I think in order to approach any game, but especially Thirsty Sword Lesbians, because the playbooks are so well crafted, each one has the description and their arc. So I like to see one shots as a step in that journey of that arc, and having a meaningful decision or choice happen either at the climax to like initiate it or at the end. So yeah, get the girl or something like the turn, or realize, oh, you can't be together and see something changes. But knowing your play, like knowing what excites your players in the playbooks, like that they choose, as well as focusing on that smitten question, because that smitten question is the focus of their insecurity and their conflict. So that is a really, to like Alexa's point, it's a really easy touch point to always go back to and really develop a lot in a small amount of time.
Yeah. And if anyone is like this is like your first introduction to TSL. Each playbook has their own smitten question, and it's essentially whenever you feel smitten by someone, you say why, you give them a string, which is a sort of mechanic within the game, and then you have to answer a question that is so painful because it's always a question of like why this would never work. If you're the scoundrel, you have to ask why your romance would never last. If you're the seeker, you have to say which of your values do they openly violate or decry. Like there's always some tragic thing that's like, well, I love you so much, or I'm so smitten by you, but it could never be. You'd never accept me, or we're too far apart.
Yeah, the thing that's brilliant about it is that you yourself have to answer it. So you are acknowledging that you're projecting something. So you still have the agency that is an unreliable narrator type of thing. So one of my favorites is the Infamous playbook. It's very like redemption arc coded, and the spin question is undeserving. And why do you think they would be wrong to forgive you? So you have to come up with a reason, do some self-reflection of the character, and go like, oh, because some way, it doesn't always have to be something super violent or anything like that. If anything, it shouldn't be, but kind of hitting those points and it gives permission and an opportunity and a prompt for players to lean into what their characters are, as well as their character direction. So you can kind of take that and direct them along the one shot and just kind of align the gameplay to those questions and answers.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Alexis, anything you want to add before I move on to the next one?
No, I think that's everything.
Awesome.
I think those are the best points.
Nice. Thank you so much. Yes. Please. TSL is, I would say TSL, there's some games that really work primarily, they're like Alice Missing is like a one-shot game, right? Like you play it over a single session. Some games like really only shine in once you've played, session 21. TSL is one that I think it remarkably handles both of them very well. But All right, I'm going to move on to the next question. Anthony, we'll start with you.
Yeah.
What's your biggest tip for facilitating character creation and like character creation, world building, all the stuff that goes into, you know,
Sure.
before you kind of jump into the game itself?
So yeah, how do you begin? I mean, so there's a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games out there. I mean, we know like in the 2010s, like everyone and their girlfriend's ex made a PBTA game. So yeah, same. Yeah, we all been there. But the thing is, like, number one, like, why TSL, and understanding like what kind of stories that TSL can produce. I mean, it's in the title. It's Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and if any one of those words don't work with you, then maybe, I don't know, re-examine your life. But I think in terms of approaching character generation, world building, it's why pick this over anything else? And then once again, like, fall back on the playbooks of these, like, why do these character frameworks, these archetypes, how would they resonate to the way you'd want to play? Because everyone gets a sword or a type of thing that represents them, as well as just things that they have to grapple with, any sort of internal conflict or external conflict, anything you want to. They're sometimes more forward-facing, like the Beast or the Scoundrel, where it's more externally produced, or there's more internal stuff, kind of like the Devoted. And I think figuring out a lot of what people are excited about, and then you want to like lean in and kind of foster and encourage those that kind of exploration of what's exciting. Because it's like, oh, I just like, it shouldn't just be, well, if there is like a single point of excitement, it's just like, yeah, dig deeper. What else is there? What else could be interesting? And based on that, you figure out what kind of character they want to play, and then you kind of go into what does that character want, or how do they want it, or the things that they're kind of torn between, and that will help inform the rest of building like any sort of opposing force or obstacles that you could come up against. But yeah, it's really just understanding why you want to play the game, and why certain characters are appealing to your players.
That's such a holistic approach. I love it so much, Anthony. You were like, well, okay, so you want to maximize your daring because that's like the most frequently used. Sorry, I don't want to yuck anybody's job.
Sure.
I absolutely definitely play games that like delight you, but like I was not expecting such a holistic answer. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, first off, you got to maximize your heart. Like,
right. There we go. Yeah. How about you, Lily? What's your how do you facilitate character creation?
So I think with me, like, there's some games where you can kind of tell, like, when you're running it, you're the GM, the DM, whatever, you can kind of like, you know, if it's like more of a traditional game like Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder, you can kind of just be like, oh yeah, go make your choices, and then we'll kind of talk about them afterward. This is not a game where you do that. Like, you as a person running it really want to be in there, like, listening to what they're doing, asking them questions about their choices, like answering questions that they have about stuff, because what they're basically like, pretty like every choice you make on like a TSL character sheet informs you as like, oh, they picked this move, that means that they want to see this thing, or like when they're picking like what their look is like, and oh, they picked this look, I want to do something like that, like touches that, or that really like shows that in some way. So yeah, it's, I guess, like, my biggest tip would be like being as involved as you can be in like your players making their choices, talking about stuff, ask them questions to get them thinking, like be interested in what they're going on about. Like, if they're like between a couple playbooks, be like, oh, what's the biggest thing about those playbooks that like makes you so interested, and like, can I help you like decide, or like point you in like a different direction if you like, oh, actually I'm really interested in this playbook might do that better, or something. Like just being extremely involved and asking questions, also like to help with the like dynamics and stuff, like poking them in the direction of like, oh yeah, well, the Seeker is extremely tied to a toxic power, maybe that's the toxic power that like made the beast become a beast or something like that. Like
Yeah.
pointing them and sort of like getting them all like tied together and stuff, like that really makes it all tight and good and gives you a lot of options to be like, okay, now I can pull all my strings and poke all my stuff and give them a bunch of hotties to talk to.
The goal of the
and-
game.
Yes, the goal of the game, exactly. Yeah, just like, and in the back of the book, there's a whole like section about going through and like setting things up and like talking together as like, what are we interested in doing in this game, and like, why is that informing our character choices and stuff. So yeah, just being extremely involved in that and like being a sort of facilitator of discussion and asking, answering questions and poking them, and yeah, just getting all that juicy details out for everybody to play with.
Yeah. You mentioned like kind of really like diving into the look, and I find like every time I play a game of TSL, I instantly like want an artist to like create our characters.
Exactly.
Like I'm always just like, man, these are cool. These characters
Whenever
sound
I'm
so
like,
cool. I want
like
an
a
artist.
one shot or like anything, I'm like, okay, well, I picked these things for my look, but like, here's my whole vibe. Like, I just get
Here's
into
my
it,
Pinterest
like,
board for the character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like find a pickaroo that I like, and I'm just like, okay, here's 7 pickaroos that I did already.
I think too with like the queer challenged folk, having any sort of reference. So it could be like She-Ra and the Princess of Power, like the new show. I think that's a really good touchstone that doesn't queer bait in any sort of way. I even like the photo of Anne Hathaway stabbing that guy for that play.
That like everybody loves.
Yeah, that everyone loves. It's this. You see, there's death, there's kissing.
Yes.
There's no. So it's, I think also finding any sort of like touch points and references. Like even, oh god, I know we were talking about like older references, but like Princess Bride. Imagine if Wesley and Inigo Montoya having their duel, and they're taunting, they're moving, they're like having that, except then they kiss at the end. That would just it's having.
I remember that scene. It was really good. Like I thought the actors really, the cinematography of that was perfect.
The number of times I've like talked about a setting, or like one of the things I've said about like a game that I want to play or talk about is like, it's this, but if that was really gay and like they actually kissed.
If the camera didn't just loom on them kind of looking smoldering at each other, but they actually did make out.
Like they actually made out, and then
and not
and then you also got to see them afterwards once they're together. Like that's what this is gonna be.
And not like a chaste kiss on the forehead or some shit.
Like, oh no, they're in there.
They're smooching.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, we talked about one shots. So we're flipping the table a little bit. Sometimes long games. Sometimes your characters kind of don't know particularly where to advance. You're not really sure how to kind of keep the story together after that first impactful beat. There can be all different sorts of challenges in running long games. So Lily, what is your thoughts on the challenges that you've seen in kind of running longer games and how you've addressed them?
Sure, yeah. I think sort of the big umbrellas of what I like, all my thoughts go up into is pacing and like keeping everybody engaged and like wanting to keep it going after you've been playing for 6 months and you're still like wanting to keep going, and making sure people are still like engaged and wanting to do that and stuff. So back to like long-term campaign can go months, years, whatever, but like back to the very start of this, like doing that palette and doing that like sort of like setting, building, character creation, all tied together stuff, that's going to really inform like the players get to speak up and say, this is what I want to see, this is what I don't want to see, like this is the kind of story I don't want to tell, this is the kind of people I want to see in here.
How often do you revisit the palette? How often do you find yourself going back to revise it or to recheck on it with the group?
Yeah, I was just gonna say that like after like a while, like it's definitely good to like after a few sessions making sure like, oh, have I like hit, are there things that I've like missed, are there things that have changed too, like be going back to the players and being like if you notice them talking about a thing like, oh hey, in the palette it said this, do you want to like add something else or like change it, because like the palette is not a like etched in stone, once it's there, like we can go back and be like, oh actually I read a book that made me really want to talk about this thing that I wasn't interested in at the beginning. So maybe we could start invoking that. Like, yeah, the palette is just this good, like a painter's palette. Like you can go back to it, you can like start swapping paints together, and like, yeah, I definitely go back to the palette and like look at stuff and like, oh yeah, I missed this thing. I need to fit that in. Oh, I can fit that in with the next like thing that the toxic power is gonna do. So yeah, definitely go back to the palette. Don't feel like you can't change it or like talk to the players about it or like bring something up. Um, I also with pacing, there's like it's sort of in a lot of Power by the Apocalypse games, but like the sort of idea of this like uh, April will hate if you do it as a clock, but if you do it as a like a countdown or a track of some kind, like sort of thinking of the like, okay, if the world goes how I think it'll go, here's what'll happen, and then like, oh, they did this. My GM move is going to be to let them know, like, do a cool cutaway to the hot villain monologuing about a thing, and like show them that this thing's happening, and like move along that countdown and show them like consequences and like how things are engaging, and like, you know, show them that the world is a thing that's happening and like what they're doing matters.
Yeah.
In terms of engagement, checking in, like whether it's about the palette or just in general of like, hey, we've done 5 sessions of this, how's everyone feeling? It's a safety tool. It's like good in general, just to be like, do we feel like we want to keep going with this, or like, what are we feeling? How's everyone feeling about their characters? Checking in is super big and important.
Yeah.
I think like a sort of not related to the direct at the table playing, but like a thing that I've and like a lot of games I've played in find to like keep engagement up and like really be invested in the characters is like write fanfic for your character. Like
Yes.
like write out like if there's a thing of like, hey, we talked about this thing that we did our characters did in the past before the game started. Do you want to write that out together? Like that's so good and fun because you could just be like, yeah, let's write a thing out, and then you come to the table with like, oh yeah, we wrote this scene and we decided that like, oh, actually they both had a crush on this person or something. Like, yeah, writing those scenes and like writing stuff like that and coming up with stuff is very, very cool. I think the last thing I'll mention is sort of a thing that I like to borrow sometimes from I forget if it's mentioned in the book or not, but like a thing that's in other Power by the Apocalypse games, like love letters, of the like, oh hey, it's been like 2 weeks since we played. In the game, it's been, we're gonna do like a month. What have you been up to in that month?
Yeah.
Here's a thing, like, and you get to sort of like, they get like a thing they get to answer and engage with. This touches on a question that's going to be later, but like you can do like custom moves with that of like, how well did you, like, you said you were going to be like dealing with like facilitating this conversation. How's that been going? And like, yeah, doing things like that can really help too with like, oh, this is a new thing I get to like apply to what I've been imagining and stuff. So yeah, doing those things to help pacing and like making sure everyone's engaged and like checking in and being like talkative and communicating with each other, I think is the best thing for like making sure a long-term campaign keeps going and is good for everybody.
That's awesome. Yeah, I love love letters. I use them in a lot of my one-shot games to kind of kick them off. I hadn't thought of using them after, you know, X sessions or after a break in the game. But that makes total sense because it's the way to sort of like not have everything have to be so like a lot, giving the space for time to pass, but also making sure that you kind of acknowledge like what happened in that time and how things have changed
totally.
and how, you know, it's like when you go to season 2, like what's changed since season 1.
Yeah, between like sort of arcs or like seasons of the game is a great time for those.
Yeah,
and for like playbooks like changes and stuff too.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. How about you, Alexis? What's your approach for long-term games?
So on that, right, on that like topic of like changing and arcs and stuff. So that is a great time to check in again, do the palette, do the look back at the palette, go like, okay, what are we excited about now? Like we've dealt with this toxic power, we've dealt with this arc or whatever. What do we want to do next? Because I think one of the things going to happen is like we want to keep running, but we don't know what we want to do,
Right.
and therefore people kind of fizzle because it's like I don't actually like how this is going, and you don't want to lose that enthusiasm. So I definitely think, you know, making sure people are aligned at the end of every arc if you want to do another arc Otherwise, maybe it's time for a new campaign with new characters, if that doesn't feel. So you check in, you see how people feel, because you can still always play together even if the campaign changes.
Right.
So there's never a shame in that kind of check-in and letting people know, like, hey, yeah, I'm not feeling it, or I'm loving this. Please, let more, please. I need an infinite amount of this. And I think another big thing is TSL has the playbook change, right? So like Lily mentioned, right, playbook changes are a great thing to happen in those arcs, but I think building towards the playbook change can be really good for a long-term arc, right? Especially if you are experienced TSL players, right? You know about the playbooks, you kind of have an idea about the vibes. Going like, ooh, well, I'm going to start as a bloody, but I want to change into a chosen. So then you can have the GM start, as the GM, you can start building in this destiny earlier if you know the players, like what they're building towards for their playbook change, which can be really interesting. Or, oh, I want to be a beast, or it comes kind of organically. And in the middle of the campaign, they're like, oh, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to become a matriarch, right? They meet some NPC and they're like, I'm going to adopt this little shit. I don't know about this kid. They're annoying and I need them to be my child. And so I'm going to be a matriarch. I'm going to playbook change into this. So now you're building them towards that arc, and I need to find them 2 other family members for the mechanic, right? So you go, okay, well, now I'm going to build, and that can make the long term feel really satisfying. And then I think another big thing is you have that playbook mechanic. So leaning into the chosen, right? You have the chosen, you look at their destiny, and the long term arc, it's like make sure that it feels good, and you try to like involve everyone's storyline into those playbook mechanics or into those backstories, like we were talking about earlier, where we have maybe you wrote a scene and now you're having this backstory and starting to weave this. So if you start getting all this enthusiasm, building towards these big payoffs can really make the long-term campaign feel good, and it keeps the juice going.
Yeah.
I definitely love the writing fix thing. That's something I love to do too. I've done it many times with Lily, so and it's exciting, it's fun, and as long as everyone has the free time, it feels great just to kind of like get in there and get in the lore, get nerdy with it.
Fill in all those backstory
so
details,
really
fill in all those bits,
yeah, give them little shits, and so it's great, and it's a fantastic time, and it's good to be fans of your characters, because that's one of the coolest things about TTRPGs is you're making the best characters in fiction to you.
Yeah.
Right. Like they might not be an Oscar award winner, right? But to you, what happens to, the teacup headed weirdo that you made that everyone's become super attached to? That's the number one priority. Everyone's thinking about that at the end of the campaign. And so getting to engage with those characters, becoming your own fandom is one of the best ways to really have that excitement. If everyone has like the energy about these characters in the world, that's going to really keep that flow.
Nice. I think one of the most tragic changes I remember seeing was the nature witch, our sort of our baby gay who's so precious, turning into the seeker, like getting sucked into the toxic powers, and it was just like, but wanted to change them. Oh, it was like such a great and it was not a plan to anything. It was just like, well, that's those playbook changes can be so. They just drive so strong towards like, well, this is my new arc. This is so my new quest. What I need to do now.
Well, and then like it's both like it can correlate to like an arc of the game, but like the characters go through their own arcs too, and like I think that's especially important for a longer running game. Is like your character doesn't have to end because they solved their problem with their like. I had a seeker that solved their problem with their toxic power, but now they had this problem of like, I have all the stuff that I've been keeping inside. Now what happens with it?
Right.
Now I'm a beast, and I get to show it and deal with like, how far do I go with it and stuff. A character can like, and I know some Power by the Apocalypse games will have like, a character can only have 2 playbooks and then they must leave, but like, you can kind of just keep doing emotional arcs if you feel like there's more, and then once you as a player are like, okay, I feel like that's good. Like then you could maybe have a new character or something. But multi-playbooks are great.
I do like that you point out the difference of like the character arcs don't have to necessarily fall in line with the plot arcs. Like we might have like a big issue with a toxic power that we will resolve over the course of say a season or whatever the number of sessions it is, and your characters might at that moment have a big pivotal moment for them, but they may also be kind of working on different timetables. Smaller things that happen in the game maybe the thing that trigger them changing playbook, resolving or coming into new issues. And so that also I think kind of like adds to the cadence of it. It's not all just like everything leads up to one final session. It's like dynamic and cool things are happening all the time. Different things are big spotlight. So awesome. Thank you so much for these questions. So everybody, these were the questions that we're going to ask about every game, these first three. So this is what we'll, in the future Dice Pool follow-ups, we'll be asking about Monster of the Week and Blades in the Dark and Fate and who knows, maybe more. But now we're going to go into topics that were specifically TSL focused, and these were all generated, or these were all given to us by all of you, Lily and Alexis and Anthony. Thank you. So we're going to dive into them to be a little bit more TSL specific. So start off, Alexis. Let me see if I'm at the right. Yes, I'm in the right place. Let's talk about conditions. And you had mentioned sometimes GMs really struggle with how conditions are supposed to work and like the best way to bring them in the game. So yeah, tell us your thoughts on conditions.
Yeah. So I watch a lot of TSL streams on top of GMing at a ton. I also watch streams of people playing it because I just enjoy it. I enjoy watching people play the game. I love the game a lot. And so something I noticed was a lot of GMs kind of think, oh, I'm supposed to tell them what to feel. But the most fun part of TSL is that you're not supposed to tell them how they react to getting hurt or something happening. That's up to them. When they stagger and they take those two conditions, you can suggest, right? Like one of the things you can be like, oh, I think you probably would feel guilty here, especially if they're struggling. They might need that help, but let them have the table. Make it a suggestion because it feels more impactful when they say, oh, I think I'm going to be angry and guilty. And you might get these really fun, unexpected reactions too, where it's like, oh, wait, no. They actually feel angry about this. This person never gets angry, so I wouldn't have thought to suggest them being angry. But no, this is the first time. And if someone takes a condition that they don't normally take, it's always really exciting because then like we're seeing like a new range of emotion out of this character. Right. Like a lot of players will like I've noticed will like kind of lean away from one, maybe for like the min-maxing factor, like, well, I really like to roll this move.
Right.
But when they decide, you know what? Fuck it. I'm guilty. It's great, and that can make a really great role playing moment and out of character moment too, where they've decided, you know what, I'm leaving min-maxing behind. I have to be guilty. This is the only emotion I can feel here. And so I think, having them direct it is going to feel more satisfying, and is also, how the rules are written. So you definitely want to apply the, make suggestions, but never give them like, you are angry right now, because it can feel really jarring as a player. Like, I'm not angry. What do you mean? I'm not angry about that. Like, I didn't even care about that guy that much. I may be guilty, but angry? No.
Yeah, I do love it sometimes when people are like, do you feel guilty about this? And someone's like, no, I don't feel guilty at all. Like I did what was right. Like I'm injured. I'm angry, I'm something, but I'm not gonna. That's a delightful moments for defiance and defining the characters, like how they respond. How about you, Lily? What's your thoughts on Alexis? Did I cut you off? Did you have any?
No. You're okay. 100%. Awesome. I'm good.
Yeah. How about you, Lily? What's your thoughts on conditions in game?
Yeah. I think my biggest thing about it is approaching it from like as a like a GM, like with my NPCs taking conditions. I've seen sometimes people can kind of treat them as like, oh, this is just like HP for my baddie, and it's not that. Like, you can extrapolate as much as you can and be like, oh, it is, but like it's not. It's not just like, it's like, because there's the whole thing of like, once they have 3 conditions they're out, or like once they have so many conditions they're out, or whatever. But like, it's more like your NPCs are also people and characters in this game, right. And like they might, like, if they took 3 conditions that were like insecure and guilty and afraid, then they might leave. But like if they took angry, just angry, they might do something that ends the conflict or something, like because they storm out or run away or something. I think that's a big important thing to remember, is like your NPCs get condition moves. When they take a condition, they get to do stuff. Like you get to make a move as a GM to be like, oh, they're afraid, they're gonna run away. Like they're not gonna let you finish the fight. Like they're just gonna get out of here. Like they might run, or if they're angry, they might do something they regret later, or like break something that they like shouldn't. they get to do similar things to like, you know, how the players can clear their conditions. They also, NPCs also get those sort of moves that they can make when they take a condition. Yeah, I wanted to, like, it's a big deal to get a condition. It like, I know some people can just be like, oh yeah, they get that, they're angry anyway, next, like,
Right.
but yeah, it's like, no, they're angry. How does this character process that, and what do they do because of that? Okay, they went and broke the sapphic colored Fabergé egg that was super valuable or something.
Oh, no.
Like what do you all do about that? They broke the egg that you were here to get. Like, what now?
Yeah.
Like, it's like it should be a big deal, and like
Yeah.
it should be like the character should do something because of that, because now they're feeling this emotion so intensely that like they get this move to do a thing.
Yeah, it's such a
Yeah.
gift, I think, to a GM to be sort of imbued with that. Like, oh, now I have direction for this NPC that like is an important villain or someone who's who's trying to help you or who needs help or something like that. Like, but now I have this kind of like, I had that idea of where they were going to go, but now now I sort of know their trajectory,
Yeah.
at least for the moment.
Yeah, and I think sort of like what Alexis was talking about with like sometimes a character, like a player character, can go in an unexpected direction of like, oh, are you feeling angry about this? I'm actually feeling insecure about this. Like, that can also happen with your NPCs of like, if the character did something like, if it's like a fight that wasn't exactly like sword fighting, it was more of a like debate or words at each other, like, oh, actually, this person also didn't entice. Maybe I'm feeling insecure now because now I'm all like flustered and stuff. Like it can also go in unexpected directions with those conditions that will again like sort of roll into, okay, they make a condition move that means something happens. How do the players react to that? So yeah, like it's a thing when they take a condition, and like really treating it like that, I think is the big thing that I wanted to talk about.
I think
I think it like it creates those moments like right, you think of like the villain hits the self-destruct button. It's like, I don't even care if I die, I just hate you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like that's like, angry is a great moment for the self-destruct button to get hit, and they're like, okay, we got to get the fuck out of here, or no, I really need to take them down. I can't risk them getting away.
I'll stay here even though the spaceship's gonna explode.
Yeah, that moment of like, I don't care if you win, I just want him to lose or whatever. Like,
yeah. I think anytime you feel like, I feel like so often in many games, like agency is really important. Like, it's really important for the players to feel like they can affect the world and they change things. But like experience is also really important. And experience is like, I have been affected by this thing, and to model that with a GM, be like, oh, this character is affected by your actions. Like you have changed who they are because of what you've done. And it's like, it's really changed. It's really affected them. I think it's a huge like signifier. Like, it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to like feel things. It's okay to like, have your character have bad things happen to them and let that change them. So it's a great way to model that as well. It's just showing people that everybody in this world is human, or at least everyone is a person. I don't want to generalize.
Good catch.
Yeah. I think next one is jumping to Lily again about safety tools and best practices. You had mentioned, we both talked about palette quite a bit, which is a great tool of like, what do you want to see, what don't you want to see? But there's a lot of other tools that are mentioned in the game, and of course there's tons of safety tools just available at all. What do you feel is sort of like best practices for using them in game and making sure that they feel accessible to everybody who's playing?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, like I think all three of us have talked about the palette so far, but like, yeah, that's great. Like, it gives the players agency to be like, this is what I'm interested in, and more importantly, this is what I'm not interested in. Like, I don't want to see this, like, or whatever. So yeah, that's really good for a one shot. It can take up a bunch of the time. So like, if you want to sort of like pre-fill it with some things, that can be helpful, but like make sure you give the players like a chance to be like, okay, here's kind of my vibe for the setting. What are some things about it that you're especially interested in or especially not interested in? Like, making sure players have that time to make sure that they're heard and stuff is really good. Things that I use for basically like every game I play are lines and veils. Those are really good for like everyone being like, if there's a thing that's like unexpected or expected, or like, and I think being you not being afraid to be like, hey, I know, like, I don't know if anybody like doesn't want to say a thing or whatever, but like, this is my line, and like sort of starting that can help everybody get like, oh, actually, I really don't want to see this. This is a line for me or something. I think a sort of addition that I've sort of adopted, like in some of our games and stuff, is like conditionals. As like, I don't want this to happen to my character, but it's okay if other people have like if someone else wants to get wrapped up in a spider web because they're into that, cool. I personally don't want to get wrapped up in a spider web.
Right.
Like, that can also be a thing too, is like very related to those lines and veils. Checking in is also a thing that we've mentioned a lot, like mid-game, after a session, like after an arc, just like checking in is good basically anytime to like make sure you're all communicating and everyone's having a good time. Like speaking up if like, hey, I noticed some people got a little quiet after that happened. Let's check in. Are they like not a fan of how that went? Or like, do we need to change anything about it? A lot of the safety tools are kind of like variants on each other, I feel, because like a check-in can be like a soft X card, or like a line is sort of an X card before the case. So yeah, I think using a bunch of them in like different ways is really good. And I think sort of the a thing that sometimes people forget is also a safety tool is take a break. Like if you've been playing for 2.5 hours and like everyone's kind of like feeling high emotions or something, just like, hey, let's take a 10-minute bio break, come back to it, like think about stuff, and then we can get back into it after that. Yeah, that's also a safety tool. And remember, you get XP for using safety tools, so you're both mechanically and you get XP for it too.
I think that was one of the most brilliant moves. There's so much great design in TSL, but like actively encouraging people to use safety tools. Sometimes people can be really reluctant to do it. They can forget about it, or they can feel embarrassed about it. And it's like, oh, totally, no, that's a move. Like that's a move you do in the game as a player is use the safety tools. You get XP. What do you do to move? It's a good thing.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, totally. I know I felt that sometimes when it's like, I have a thing, but like even mentioning it as a line will make, I don't know if I want to do that, but like, like having it be a thing of like, oh, the GM put down lines for themselves. Like I feel better about that. Or let's seeing on your character sheet, oh, using a safety tool is encouraged by the game. Like, yeah, let's take a break, everybody. Like, it's going to be good for us, and we get XP for it. So
yeah,
double thumbs up.
Min-max that social contract.
That's what we're all here for, min-maxing.
Yeah.
I mean, you take care of yourself, you get XP. Like it's some good good incentive. It's kind of wild because just like a lot of GMing, and this kind of goes across, this is system agnostic. This is essentially just any sort of game facilitation. You have to show it first often for players to kind of get, like, it gives them implicit permission to also use it. Mm-hmm. So the way I see safety tools, it's like inextricably linked to the game itself. Like it's like the lines and veils that Lily was mentioning, like that's expectation setting. It's like, what can we explore? What can we challenge? What is just not interesting or just upsetting? Because no matter what, a game and story isn't more important than people.
Yeah.
And like, even if you wanted to hit really hard with like a dramatic beat, like you're in your home with friends.
Yeah.
Like, even if like, it's not worth it for that kind of boundary pushing for that. It's the whole idea of safety tools is knowing where the boundaries are so you can run wild within them. Mm-hmm. Especially if like those boundaries can still be hazardous and you can still explore different things, but there are specifics and how do you say it? So it's not necessarily making everyone like just eliminating discomfort, but it is eliminating a lot of any sort of trauma or fear, mm-hmm. and making people excited to play. So I think familiarizing yourself with the safety toolkit. So if you Google like the TTRPG safety toolkit, Kiana Shaw and Lauren Bryant Monk, for like, I don't know, like a long ass time.
Yeah, it's like 5 or 6 years at least.
They have like aggregated all of it to kind of reference. But yes, lines and veils are huge. Making sure like what just do we not approach, or what can we do behind like a black, like behind a curtain, behind the veil, quite literally the veil. It's, if you didn't know that, now you know. The idea that there are constraints on how you kind of model your game, it also helps that you don't like put in work that won't be received well. So it's like you don't put in extra work and then kind of feel hurt that's like, oh, they didn't really like it, or they didn't hit as hard as I wanted it to. So that also helps you with prepping and how to perceive it. But having this always be an ongoing thing. So yes, like session 0, important. Everyone says, oh, have a session 0, do this. But what you're doing is actually expectation setting for the whole game.
Right.
So it's like, what story are we kind of telling? What kind of characters we're going to play? What kind of topics could we possibly encounter? Obviously, you don't have to include all of them, but it's something that you want to essentially see where people are excited about, and that actually limits your scope and gives you a lot of creativity to work within that space. Lily and Alexis talked a lot about check-ins, and what I like to do as well is not just like after the game or anything, even before I'm about to do something fucked up to your characters, you can retcon it. That's right. What I've been doing. I was like, this is going to be wild. You can say no. Yeah. So I often give explicit permission like for that, mostly because a lot of people talk about the X card, and I've introduced like a lot of people, like over 50 people to the role-playing game hobby, and everyone's embarrassed that you're playing pretend as an adult.
Yeah.
And already that is really makes a lot of people very self-conscious. So, and I know I failed when a couple of my friends during certain scenes wanted to hit the X card, but they were just like, but it was a good scene. So
right.
I didn't want to disrupt it. And like, that sucks. It feels bad. And it is bad because like best case, they leave your game. Worst case, you're not friends anymore.
Yeah, right.
So the idea of like putting up kind of beacons of when it's like showing like, okay, the check-in is I'm going to do this thing. Is everyone cool? Great. Because otherwise like it didn't happen, or maybe it was just like through the villain's eyes, or just anything to not push your players in that kind of way, because you want to challenge their characters. You don't want to challenge your friends. You're not a therapist or a coach.
Right. Gaming can be cathartic, but it is not therapy, right?
It's a big thing and I think that's a big thing, especially with a lot of the characters in the playbooks, is it really is parallel to a lot of like real lived experiences. Yeah, they're all oh no, what is that word? It's fine. Allegories.
Allegories, yeah. There we go.
Yeah, they're all kind of allegories in different forms, but it's very much, it could touch on something a little trickier. So want to be very mindful. And the thing is, like, you are not entitled to people's trauma or their history.
Right.
I know, like, people talk about, well, this is like old school mentality is like, oh, just tell me and I'll like incorporate. It's like, it doesn't matter. You shouldn't have to know. If someone says no, I don't want it, don't care.
Yeah.
Like, I remember I had an arc like where I had myconids for a D&D game, and someone didn't want to have mushrooms. I'm like, oh well, yeah, and scrap it because I like this person, and you know what, I can be more creative. Like, and you know what, that stuff also, that work isn't wasted. You can just pocket it and save it for something else. But the last thing I have is like open door. Like, we're not like in a Pearson testing center. Like, get up and use the bathroom. Like,
take care of yourself.
Yeah, take care of yourself. Like, the only this isn't related to RPGs, but I used to work at a Lego store, and there was a kid who was crossing their legs and crying, staring at the big like Millennium Falcon because he couldn't decide whether to use the bathroom or keep looking at Lego. And I'm just like, it'll be here, my guy. So very much like there's a lot of encouragement, and since, as Lily kind of said, with the palette, it's same thing with like the lines and veils. It's a living document, and to do that, like I would like to bring up lines of veils every session now. Like this is a very recent thing for me. It's like, hey, Lee, let's revisit this. Is anything different? Is anything changing? Is everyone still good with this? And yeah, when you like, it's a little bit slow at first, but then you're like, oh, okay, oh, this is a new thing, or oh, doesn't matter. I know for one of mine, I was like, oh, I don't really want to have any sort of relationships with PCs. I just only want to have it with NPCs. And then something happened in the game, like, oh no, fuck that, I'm in.
Totally.
Like now,
It's
and
changed,
that actually changes. I was like, oh, okay, this is and having that ability to revisit and then keep it top of mind, because life is a lot, and it's hard to keep everything in your head, and it's nice for everyone, because it takes like a couple minutes to just like pull it up and go, hey, we don't have to run through it word for word, but it's like, is everyone cool with this? Or there's a lot of, it's essentially prompting consent with your players and with yourself.
Yeah, seeking it often. Lily, I'm going to jump back to you for just a second, because we have a couple minutes, and although we didn't say we're going to take questions in chat, this one was sort of I think really a useful one. So can you just expand very briefly on how XP is awarded for using safety tools?
Yeah, totes. Part of the end of session move is like, there's the different things for like conditions that if anybody in the party met them, then everybody gets XP for it. The very last one is, did someone use a safety tool? And it gives some examples like adding to the palette, checking in. So yeah, you are like at the end of the session, we look back and be like, yes, you added to the palette. We took a break. We checked in about that fight afterwards. Like we get XP. So yeah, it's written into the game as part of the end of session move. That rewards you for being safe and making sure everybody's cool and comfortable.
Yeah. So if you are that kid and you just go take care of yourself, knowing the Lego Millennium Falcon will still be there when you get back. You've used the open door policy. You've taken care of yourself. You're getting XP at the end of that session, kid. So good job on you for taking care of yourself.
It's a great way to also just prompt that, like, you can feel like, kind of like Anthony was saying, you can sometimes you can feel embarrassed about like saying a thing or be like, I really wanted to X card this, but everyone else was too excited. Like it is better for you to say something than like, and make sure we're all good with this and make the scene awesome in a different way than have it continue doing something else that's like making somebody not feel cool.
Yeah. Speaking of people doing bad things in all the best ways in this case. So a villain is really a centerpiece of so much media, right? Like so many movies, you're kind of like, well, the heroes, the protagonists, they can be whatever, but like you're sold on it if a villain is really compelling, if they're scary, if you kind of almost believe in that, if you're like, well, you have the right idea, but you're approaching it the wrong way, or, if they have something about them that really you are drawn towards, I think. And that is really true in role-playing games as well, that having a villain that your characters, the players love to hate or hate to love, or both, is really important. So yeah, Anthony, what's your sort of go-to when you're trying to develop villains?
So yeah, you said it earlier, just like all these villains are people, so they have emotion. And to Lily, your point about conditions, about how let them feel it and then show how they're feeling it, show how they react. My go-to is mirroring the PCs. So like, what characters did they create? And I often go like, okay, how are they similar and how are they different? And the two approaches that I kind of take with that is, if they're very similar, what happened in the villain's life that made them that gave them a choice? And when I talked earlier about giving your characters like a important choice to make in sessions, like what choice were the villains given that they chose something else? And the other one is, it's like if they have a similar goal that that the player characters have, that they are just doing it in a very different way, and that it's something that like the player characters don't agree with, but at the same time it's achieving a certain goal. It's very much having this multifaceted character of using those conditions as prompts to make them feel more more real and more realized. And the best thing I like to do is just kind of give windows to that emotional vulnerability. So yeah, have them show if they are insecure or guilty. If they're guilty, and I say it's like, if I'm going to do a move, make a move on a PC, I was like, oh, you see regret in their eyes. You can see the hesitation. You even make them empathetic or sympathetic, but just in direct conflict with how it's not just what you're trying to do, but how you're trying to do it. And I think it's really fun for me to make when you talk about making a very realized, like, compelling villain, when I say mirroring, it's nice because the players kind of understand their characters and then getting to see that in a different light and seeing what they dislike or like about it. And so they can have a continuing relationship. And it's not just like mustache twirling, though I do love that guy.
Sometimes just pure evil.
Yeah, sometimes pure evil.
Like, who delights in being evil is kind of delightful.
Like, look, I love me a Starscream all day. So like, but yeah, to make someone, to give more emphasis, it's really, you give them a motivation and a goal. And then if you're not sure how they feel about it, when they get conditions, then you get to take a beat. Like, you're not on stage, so you don't have to come up with anything right away, but you can just think about it. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Like, I think they would start processing it like this. And you don't necessarily have to even do it behind the screen. You can actually talk about it in front of the table. And just like how you can source the table for anything, you could also, like, they're kind of feeling this way about it. How do you think, like, what do your characters pick up on? And that way you get a little bit of their character's perception. And then that way you can also play off of that if your villain notices, and how they would kind of receive it. Oh yeah, and strings. Use strings a lot. That's a good it's a good motivator. And it's like having those relationships and those connections with your characters and your villains.
Yeah, I love what's your sort of go-to string move in terms of, like, I don't know, when you're putting strings between the characters and the villain and the NPCs in general, but in the villains in particular, what do you like to go for?
Oh, I love to entice, mostly because since all the playbooks have some sort of internal conflict, it's a big feelings game. So it's like, I will give you the easy way out, or I'll give you what you want. You either walk away or you join me, or like any sort of thing. Especially, I often do the villains being, if they're going up against any sort of force of nature, then the villains are either their parents that are older. I have a lot of boomer villains.
Yeah.
And or I do exes. I do a lot of exes.
Nice. Well, because then there's that immediate visceral connection to them that you're not just like, oh, they're evil and they need to be stopped. It's like you have some strong bond to them, even if it's a negative one. It's still
it's really great, because also, like, a fun way, it's like, oh, I'm the, like, if as a player, it's like, oh, I'm the reason we broke up. And then you say, oh, they were like the together one, and now they're being together doing like some messed up stuff. You're like, oh, now I have to like actually like grow up and adjust. And it builds in some easy on-ramps for character development too.
Something for them to butt up against. How about you, Alexis? What's your approach for making villains?
So I think, making a compelling villain, I think one of the big things for this is, like, they're people, but also match the tone, right? So we were talking about the cackling, just evil villain. If that's like the tone of your game, if you're all pun names and having a lark, right, then they should be equally dumb, right, to the tone of your, or contrastingly serious, right? Like we're all silly and goofy, and it's like jarring, but like in a fun way. And they're like, I, of course, would never be named a sex pun or whatever. So you want to make them fit the tone, make them feel like they belong in whatever show that you're making together, right? Whether if you're making a Saturday morning cartoon, make them feel like they fit that show. And if you're making a drama, you're making your arcane and everyone's sad, then you make them as dimensional and as layered, right, as the rest of the PCs. And I think a big thing you can do to like really make a compelling villain, especially if they're like the big bad, right? Is when you're doing those character creation questions, if you have the big bad in mind already, ask questions to the players like they're a PC, right? So you might want to use like right, like you have the questions when you're doing the creation. So you go like, oh, well, how do I feel about like, right? So when did this character mess with you, right? If everyone has a backstory, they were all working for the Empire and they left.
Yeah.
Like, right, and some of the infamous, like, what's the worst command that this person ever gave to you? And now you have a connection, like, this is what they made them do.
Yeah.
And this is the scoundrel, like, what time did you hook up with one of the people you shouldn't have, right? You start to pull in these parts, you give them the questions for the big bad, you're going to make that villain, like, really feel more dimensional. So this is the ways that you can kind of like use the mechanics, the kind of like mechanics of TSL and like the kind of ideas that it presents, and then bring that into your villains. So kind of think about where is those relationships, where are those moments, where are those connections with the villain? Like, even if it's the villain burned down my village, right? That's a big thing. But
That's a
now
big
that's
deal.
something that your
That's
character is gonna remember. They're gonna every time they interact with that character, they're gonna be like, maybe I should mark angry immediately because I can't be this person and not. I can't not feel angry and guilty. Like I didn't save them, and I got to get them. So you want to use those mechanics, bring those things in, and fold them into kind of like the weaving, the tapestry of the world. The villain should feel like they kind of weave into the world. They feel like a part of the world, not like I'm just here. I just exist.
Yeah. They're as
So I think that's
integral
really
to the world as the players are. Yeah.
Exactly.
Alexis, I was just remembering, you mentioned the Saturday morning cartoons, and I was just remembering when we suddenly were on Twitch's main page and it became the Friendship Dungeon. We're like, oh, yes, we're in the Friendship Dungeon now because suddenly this has to be PG.
That was great. Classic moment, still on YouTube. You can check it out.
Yeah. As I'm frantically telling people on chat, no more swearing.
And an example I also think any sort of they don't have to be like fully realized, but even just having 2 dimensions, it's helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Like I love like leaning back on Scorpia in She-Ra because like she's so delightful. She's just so wonderful, but she also has a job and the job sucks. So like it could be, we'll get into it a little bit later, but it's like, they could be involved in some system that like they feel like indoctrinated in or embedded in, that they don't like, they either feel indebted to or they feel like they're trapped in.
Mm-hmm.
So like always kind of giving an extra dimension, even if it's like you have like your cartoon maniacal laughing villain, but also I don't like, if you want to make it silly, like make them like have to have a croissant, like that's like their stress food. So then you can have them like even have a tell of like, oh, they just start housing some croissants in the background. It's like, oh, you're getting to them. Like it can still be silly, but at least like they're not just defined by their like occupation in the story.
But I think also like your point to saying like toxic, even if someone is the leader of a toxic power, they are still affected by that toxic power. They're still like that. It still pushes on them in ways that they don't like, or that they don't want to admit that they don't like. And so I love that notion of like Scorpia is like, she's doing her job and she feels like she needs to do it even though she knows it's wrong, but there isn't an obvious answer for her to like, well, what would I do if I wasn't doing this? Or I have to do this. Yeah, I love that. All right, I've been waiting for this question for basically the whole time since Alexis pitched it to me, which is, let's talk about making characters hot. And I mean, and maybe hot in sexy ways, but also just hot in how they become compelling, like how are you making characters that the players, we've talked about this a little bit with villains already, but like characters that really foster intimacy, foster close connections. So Alexis, thank you for putting this topic out there.
Thank you. I love it. So I had to ask it because So I think one of the big things in making characters hot to the players is session 0. We talked a lot about session 0. So one of the things in session 0, I really suggest people do, if you don't know the people that well, or you know them well, but you want to get a refresher, ask what their fictional crushes are, past or present.
Mm.
Like who was your first fictional crush? Who was your gay awakening? Who was the person you're like, oh, I need this person, whatever, right? Find those kind of things, and then you can build those in. Use those cheat codes, aim at them, target them, because it's great. It's great to. I love to make an NPC that I know someone's gonna be like submitting immediately with, and then have the payoff. Like I know you're weak to this. There's no way. You see the bondage lady in the friendship dungeon, and you're gonna have to. You're gonna have to submit. You're gonna be so tempted to betray your friends here. And I know, because I strike to every single one of your weaknesses. I found your weak spots. There's no way you can survive this, or will you? And
You're
it's
very
great.
good at that. You've done that several times.
It's a skill. It's a skill to hone.
The character is just introduced and just like you describe them, and it's like, this is the one you were talking about, right? The one that would get me? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I
mean, even the things that you don't intend, even the things you don't intend. I remember one game I was like, am I furry now?
This better not awaken anything.
So, attack your friends. Use their weaknesses to make them sexy. That's right. She's extremely buff, very, very buff, and I know you can't resist.
Hold on, the villain question was the last question. I say this as you're like steepling your fingers.
Yes, I'm the true villain. I'm the villain of sexiness.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, so like that's one of the big things, and I think following the strings, that's a great way to make sure that they're hot, right? You're following once you get that string, that's a character that they want to engage with more. So like following the string, following those lines, that's a great way to like use the mechanics to kind of follow. Like, okay, like maybe I didn't expect them to find them hot, but now that that's here, I made them to target Lily, but really I want to hit Nomo here. So I'm gonna, now that there's there, I'm gonna like, right, don't be afraid to pivot.
Yeah.
Or
people can be hot to multiple people.
Party,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Or maybe they're a polycule in the end, who knows? But you have like really exciting. Doing a little note taking is great as a GM too, like for this, like making them hot, like remembering things. If they remember things, the characters, then the players are going to feel like, oh, they remembered this like little thing, and then like incorporating that backstory is also going to help make them hot, right? Like if there are tied, like, right, I was part of the Legion in Starcross Galaxy, right, and I'm an Infamous, and now you were my like. You were my first in command, and we were so close, and you covered for me, and now we're fighting, and can I fight you? And that's going to make them more compelling, even if they're not like sexy, right? Like, or like compelling, like this is your parent, right? I'm a seeker, and I'm compelled like by making them tied and listening and taking those notes. You can like talk to the player outside of the session too. That's a great way to like, okay, so this character is tied to you. Do you think they, that like this kind of thing happened in the past? And you can have these really big payoffs with these characters when you start to tie them to each other. Having these asides, I think, can really help with that. So those are some of the big things for me. So be merciless, attack your friends' weaknesses, and don't be afraid to have a little chit chat, talk about it, to exploit the weaknesses.
To exploit, ask them very kindly what their weaknesses are.
Yes.
And then. Yeah, how about you, Lily? As you're jiggling away here, being clearly affected by Alexis's jamming.
it's just it's funny because like we've said, like we've played together so much that that we have done that for each other. Like when I've run a session, I'm like, this is the one that's gonna get Alexis. Yep, I know it. And like, or Alexis has done the exact same for me. Of just like the character just appears for like a second, and I'm like, this is the one. Okay, it worked. You're right. And
good job.
Yeah, that was literally, I had that written down as well for like if if it's like a longer game and like you like are friends with them, like target their weaknesses, learn them. When they talk about like characters that they know in media or whatever, like use that and like be inspired by that. But even if it's a one shot or you don't know them that well, asking some like questions like that of like, what are some characters that you really enjoyed in media, or even like aiming it specifically, like what are some villains that have been really impactful for you and stuff. Asking about stuff that they've enjoyed and like really incorporating that is really good. And also just like don't be afraid to like just in your own stuff. If you as a person were like, my gay awakening was Shigo from Kim Possible or whatever, like don't be afraid to just be like, I'm gonna make legally distinct Shigo, and then like we're gonna have fun with that. Like, yeah, when you're excited about your NPCs and your villains and your characters, and like you find them hot and cool and enticing, like it's gonna be a lot easier for you to be like, okay, this person shows up, their hair is like long and red, and it like is like waving in the wind, like it's gonna be a lot, like you're gonna be a lot more like excited to make them sound hot, and that's gonna be for the players like, oh wow, like I love their hair and their outfit is just stunning, like I want to talk to them more. Like when you're excited, it's a lot easier to make your players excited too. And then something, I guess, like in both like making them like deep and impactful and like enticing to like be close to, but also like in terms of being hot and sexy, like I always hear like in like discords and social media and stuff of like people are always like want diversity and like realness of like, you know, the spooky witch iconic is like a really hot like bigger lady, and like don't be afraid to be like to do stuff like that and like make them real and stuff, like you know, like don't be afraid to do things like that, because like I always hear stuff like that of like, and like see people like talking about that of like, oh, this game has a lot of hot characters but they're all like skinny and white and like muscular and abled and like whatever, and like like be really excited about showing off hotness in different ways and stuff. Like, are they physically hot? Are they like, are they mommy? Are they like, you know, there's a lot of ways someone can be hot. So, really engaging that. And I think Alexis like hammered on it really, really well of just like getting ideas from people and being excited about it.
Yeah, I think like like you're saying like that kind of representation can really add to like the hotness factor, right? Like, there like I don't see a lot of people like myself. I'm trans and I'm a lesbian and I'm Latina, so like it's a triple threat that makes it hard, and I'm also asexual, so I'm a lot of things, right? You know, so right, getting that representation, right? So like for an ace player at the table, maybe they would really connect to someone else that is ace in the story, and now they're like, oh, like this is something I can like really connect. I want to know more about this character just because they're like me, and I don't get to see people like me normally. And so I want to make a kinship with this character because we have this thing in common, and seeing, you know, right, your race or all these little aspects of marginalization or just like body diversity, even like minor things like club interests, like I'm really into archery, right? And I need to, you know, I love to see archers, so like that kind of feeling of like, oh, like if you can like you do some research and and now you're having like a real conversation with them about archery, they might be like, oh, I love this person. You know,
or like if like a character is like, oh, my character is like a badass archer, introduce a hot, even better archer that like they get introduced by like nailing an impossible shot, and then they like look over and like wink at the archer character, they're gonna be smitten immediately, like which is also a great way to like, if you don't know very well about your like use the smitten as a like, oh, they got smitten with this character, I wasn't expecting that, interesting, like use the smitten as well.
It's a tool. It's a great tool. I always find like whenever I try to make really impressive characters, people like not interested. And it's always my like weird goblin straight, like I'm just meandering through, like characters
love
that have
little
like,
guys.
Love little guys. All my little guys are always the hottest. Like that's the hottest thing I can present is just a little guy. Like they have no impact on
an endearing
story.
Weirdo is gonna hit so hard all the time.
They're just
I've brought in someone, and then one of my players was like, "This is my son now." I'm like, fair enough.
All right. I made them for you. Normally we don't ask all three of our panelists a question, but this question is so good. Anthony, yes, tell us about your how you make characters hot.
So like everything, like yes to everything that Alexis and Lily are saying. It's something I like to do too, is do like a zoom in. So an unintentional like brush of the hand. I like to zoom, or since it's very visual, I like to also throw in scents. Any sort of smell. It's like, because that way, before they even a character enters the scene, or if there's a remnant of them, it's like, oh, you have this scent of rose and sandalwood, and like it either be like, oh my god, or motherfucker. And it's something where like the identifier for it as well, it just, the small moments of even prompting your characters, like you find something like irresistible about this character, like what is it? And it doesn't have to be physical, it could be like how they're moving. It's kind of like the way I see it is like the revert. Oh god, this ages me, I guess, because but like
All good.
no, but in the way I'm saying, it's like a reverse ick. Just like I know I can't possibly be using that correctly, but it's something where it's like something has come up that it's like incredibly enticing and endearing, and it doesn't have to be physical. It could be the way they like brush their hair, their eyes. It could be the what is it? She's all that. Oh my gosh, she took off her glasses.
Yeah.
What?
She let out her ponytail.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like, or seeing them in a different context. It's like, oh, this is like horse girl who's quiet at the stables, and then when she's riding a horse, she's like, oh, she's fully into herself, and then she becomes, and you can get a glimpse of that. So you have those multifaceted lenses to kind of look at. But I think, yeah, pulling on the different senses, pulling on different contexts, having little like brushes here and there, just truly make it so like, even if let's say like you're doing a heist and they robbed it before you, and they just have a calling card, and it's meant for you. It's like obviously for everyone. So I think always, yeah, to what everyone else is saying, is just always kind of relating it back to your players and to your characters, and always kind of having it roll around and making it so it just really engagement, and how amazing we can all fall in love with each other and continue.
Love it. I love it. Yes. All of this is so good. So I think, a recurring theme in the game and in this conversation has been presenting a world in which people feel real, in which people are affect the players and are affected by them. And we've talked a lot about individuals, but then there's this sort of larger structure, which is the toxic powers. The toxic powers that affect everyone. They affect the players, they affect the villains, they affect just the people in the world. And they affect us, and they affect them in sort of different ways. Everybody is in some ways either complicit with them or fighting them, or a little of both. So making those toxic powers something that is really like juicy and that people are like excited to interact with, I think is a huge part of making the shape of the game feel engaging for everybody. So yeah, Lily, want to talk about what your tactics for making and playing toxic powers?
Yeah, totally. So I think a big tip from me is just as much as like a key factor of all these like how to play this game is read the book.
Yes.
Part of the book in like that like sort of building your palette, building out your setting, and talking with your players about it is when you like put together the toxic powers, one of the main questions of building them is what makes them appealing. Like, and that can be a lot of things. It can be like, oh, the really hard like kind of fashy order faction does give people like some security, or does give people like some safety, and like, so finding those ways to make it appealing, which can be a lot of different things, like being inspired by media is a great way to do it too, of like even especially for things to do and to not do. I know a thing in a lot of like movies and films and stuff is to make like a really appealing cool faction that is kind of right, and then immediately has them do something so heinous and terrible that they're like, well, I can't really agree with them because they're so wrong. But like, you can do that and have them be this you can have them be right, but go a little too far too. That's a really good way to make a good toxic power too. Like this is the resistance movement that is less afraid of collateral damage, that has like, they hit like this like supply line that also like damaged the water supply to the town, and they felt that was more important than like it was more important to nail the supply line than it was to keep water going to that other town. Like they go kind of too far, but they are right. Is a really good way to do a toxic power, I think.
How do you feel about like you have an idea about how that's going to land, right? Like you have this idea that like, oh, the players are going to see that and go, oh, you know, we agree with you, but you went too far. But what if the response is like, yeah, you know, what if like you feel like you're depicting the toxic power in a way that is you like, oh, this is too far, but the players are sort of like, no, whatever the cost, right? And like they have internalized some amount, you know, in that particular example is like we're rebelling against the fascist government, right? Like anything we do is okay. What's your sort of take if your thought on how they might respond to one bit of it? They sort of buy what if they buy into it, right? Because I've seen that sometimes where people are like, you know, like it's a power for a reason. It's compelling. How do you feel about how do you react to that in game?
I think that in that case, it's also important that like having that power, it like feel free to make them more toxic then in that case. If they're like, oh no, that was right. Then you're like, oh, you liked that? Okay, well, they're going to do worse things then. Like feel free to just keep going with it then. And that's totally a thing you can do. But also just like letting the players know that they are like part of being toxic is that you don't see people as people, that they can be assets to you, or they can just be a tool, and letting the players know that they're not special in that case, that like, oh, if you're going to join this, like if you're actually going to help out this toxic power, they might just fuck you over, and that might just happen, and they're not going to really care about that. They're getting you help them get their job done, and they don't have to pay you, or they don't have to like do what they said they were going to do. That's great for them. Like showing them that, like if you showed them like the sort of happier side of it, like the nicer side of like, oh no, they're right. Show them that darker side, show them that toxic side of like, okay, yeah, you're going to help them. Then they're going to put you in the situation that you did the thing for them and then just abandon you. Like, that's what they're toxic. Like you did the thing for them and now they're done with you. Like, just like, if players are like really like, oh, actually they're cool, then like, okay, they are cool. They're also toxic.
Yep.
Like really hammering in that toxicness of it, which is also part of the palette of like, what do they do and why is it so bad? So, really nailing in on that. I think it's definitely a balance of like, I need to make them hot and I need to make them cool, and like part of them there needs to be a reason why, like, you know, the Legion has so many people in there, because it's safe, because they do give people things. But they do it by like taking advantage of other people and like forcing their will on things, and like, you're not allowed to be this because that's too complicated to deal with for us. Right. And like, I like to be inspired by real life, but don't go too far with real life stuff, because if you're just like, this is the exact situation that you're in real life, that's going to be really like harmful and triggering. But if you get inspired by that of like, oh no, we just watched something really bad happen and no one cared about it, like you can do a mirror of that in the game of like, oh, I'm going to do something and have this government not care about it at all. And then the players can be like, you didn't care about that? What? And like, that they didn't. They were more concerned with this other thing that they deemed more important. Like,
I mean, that's the power of science fiction, right? Is to take real world issues and like give them a metaphor that makes them easier to tackle and play with in games, so you don't feel so personal, but you still get to address the heart of that issue. Right.
I think you said it. Sean, you said it earlier. Like, be cathartic, but it is not therapy. So like, don't go too hard and don't go too real with it. Like, be inspired, but don't remember your palettes and your safety tools.
If you can't talk about like the heavy stuff as people outside of the game and not as characters, you probably aren't equipped to talk about it in character. That's kind of my rule of thumb. It's like, if we want to deal with like pretty oppressive structures, then that's what the palette Swarzilli is saying. It's also just like, but if we're not in a place to even broach it as friends or even as like acquaintances, then maybe it's not the place to be able to explore that kind of stuff, because it's also a big emotional burden on you running the game. And then you all, like, as being a people-pleasing Virgo as I am, I'm just like, well, I have to then cater everything to how can I make this work? So, and then I put a lot of undue pressure on myself. It's like, this is a game. This is
Right.
then the game. We're all playing pretend and being able to, reach that catharsis together in a way that we can all be happy with.
Yeah. So what do you like to? Thank you. Yeah. What's your sort of approach for bringing them in?
I like to think of toxic powers as, like, to what Lily was saying, just like, I like to have it being this actual system.
Mm-hmm.
So if you chop off the head, why won't it die? So it's either like infrastructure's built in it, or it's this legacy thing. I mean, easy reference, like we're in the United States, we keep electing presidents. The US hasn't, like, the wealthy parts of the US haven't collapsed. So it's very much like, how do you have this overarching, essentially, like, reality that these people exist in? And to, like, what Lily's pointed earlier, it's like, yeah, they are appealing. It is appealing because, like, oh, maybe you don't want to suffer in squalor anymore, or you don't want to be chased anymore, like having, and like, this is like the easy answer of respite. And even like to what you're saying earlier, people, Sean, what you're saying earlier, is like, if people get really excited and fold into the toxic power, I love that shit, because I'm like, good, because now I'm gonna, just like how fascism works in like the real world, is like, you go little by little. It's like apparent, but it's little by little, and then you present choices I would like to present choices to my players, like, how far are you willing to go? It's like, and what is the line? And if it's something that you do, or, oh, you did this thing that was pretty innocuous, but it's like, oh, it was part of this grander plan to do this other thing, and what I like to do is like have an award ceremony in like this very Empire First Order type of gathering. It's like, everyone loves you, hooray, our heroes.
Oh, that's the worst, when like the bad guys go, yay, you saved the day. You're like, oh no, I'm the baddie.
It's like, are we? My favorite thing to do in every game, and it was always going back, it's like, wait, are we the bad guys?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's very much like, see how much like people will like their characters will allow. And you know what, if they really love it, then you know what, you only have like an hour or two left with them maybe, and then you can go your separate ways.
right. Yeah, if they're too into stormtroopers, you're like, yeah. Alexis, you put something in chat which I just think is great, which is, you know, pointing out the players aren't a monolith, right? That they're going to have differences. So we have, I'm looking at the time, and I think we have just a couple minutes to bring this in. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, about them being in places?
So I think everything Lily and Anthony are saying is great. I just wanted to add, but like, I think that there's times where you can think like, this is going too far. Like, right, I'm introducing this new set of characters, and I think they're going too far. But then like, maybe like, oh, but like, for this person, this isn't really, maybe it's not even going far enough, right? Like, because we're coming out at different perspectives, different political backgrounds, different histories, right? And like, someone might think violence against the police is too far, but this person has, you know, bad experiences with policing, and they, right, are like, no, I really don't think that this person is bad just because they did this thing. And I think going like, well, let me show you how bad they are. Sometimes it can feel kind of just bad for them. Like, well, now you're just deciding that like a person I see as heroic is a bad person.
Right.
You might Marvel movie them a little, where you're like, they have a good point, but actually they want to commit genocide. So maybe you should think twice before you support feeding the homeless.
Rough.
You know, so I think that, you know, it obviously, right, like, you're near jamming, you're telling the story, and you can make the decisions, you can make the calls, but it's good to take a second to sit back and go like, you know what, did they go too far? Like, is this character fine, right? Maybe they represent a toxic structure or something, and you're like, okay, these people are still bad, but maybe this character only goes, you know, so far as to take political action into their own hands, and people actually think that's cool. It's cool that they killed the person who's in charge of killing hundreds and thousands of lives.
Right.
You know, decides who lives or dies, and they decided to do that, and they're actually cool. And for you, it might have been like, oh, is that okay? So taking a second to look back and like, okay. So this is how my players feel. Why do they feel that way? It's having a conversation. This is a great place to like have a check-in and be like, okay, so why do you all feel this way?
Yeah.
Because I don't want to make you feel demonized, but at the same time, I want to make a story.
Right.
Totally.
It's time for it's a great time for a check-in. and go like, okay, well the vibe here is, you know, right? It's great to have those already the baddie moments, but it's also good to go like, okay, hey guys, how are we feeling? Like,
Right.
you know,
Well, especially if you feel differently than you thought they like. If you're like, oh, they're gonna be like, oh, this is the villain, this is terrible, and then they're like, yeah, you know, it's great to be checking like, hey, that wasn't what I expected.
yeah.
Let's check in about that.
Yeah. And one thing about it's like the toxic power, I also try to like make it ubiquitous in some way. So even in the smallest facets of like life and existence, it could be like everything. You have to pay for everything. You have to pay for a bathroom. You have to pay for this. And even that, having that in the background of like your payment is actually like a tithe to a church you don't really care about, but you have to pay it if you want to get out without encountering any sort of resistance. But I think even having the small moments of those little like world building tidbits of how this toxic power has become, and like what allowances are people making in exchange for that safety or that existence in that belonging within that toxic power.
Right.
So having that, like even in the small world details, going, oh, this is how they're controlling even the smallest amount of life, like a bit of your life. Like, oh, this person comes like, or you have to pay a docking fee for like someone, but this person, like this all dude crew doesn't. Like it could be even as a parent as that and as a background as that, but I think having that kind of vertical view of how all the little pies are, oh god, I can't say that, everyone has their fingers in all these pies.
Yeah. Well, and it's just a reminder that like everybody in this world is affected by it, and that all powers are alluring, right? Like that's how they got into power in the first place, is they offered something people wanted, and so they offered safety, or they offered sustenance, or they offered some sort of basic need, or you know that people thought, well, this is a worthwhile trade, until it wasn't, right? You know, until awesome.
Last thing, sorry, and it's often cyclical. So I think also presenting an option, even if your players are into it, just giving the off ramp to break the cycle, or having your villains your players give the opportunity to the villains to break the cycle, because often those toxic powers can live on because of that cycle, of that cyclicalness.
You like, that's the whole, like, you cut off the head but it keeps moving on. It's because the power is self-regenerating, and so it will come back in another form. Well, speaking of cycles, Anthony, let's jump to the next question, which is talking about creating meaningful player and character arcs. We talked about this a little bit earlier when we were talking about long-term games, but what's your sort of approach for giving each of the players that space to have their character grow in meaningful ways that they're really going to remember?
Absolutely. I mean, once again, like playbooks, and even to what Alexis and Lily were saying earlier, of like even switching playbooks. But I think since everything is, I like to think is very fluid, organic, and everything's open to changing, and the always relying back on the smitten, like where is that insecurity coming from? How is it evolving? Is it evolving? How is it changing? And then giving your players interesting choices that challenge that insecurity. Like someone believes in you more than you believe in yourself, or make you second guess a belief that you have. And I like to put those decisions in there, and those points that affect other characters, maybe affect the world in some way, that they can see the repercussions later. Like when I said earlier, like with the toxic power, like you do a mission and then you come back and you're like, uh-oh, that set up this whole other thing and that was awful.
Right.
So in always checking in about how their characters feel. It's a big feelings game. So I like to always poke and prod, like even if you don't want to talk about your feelings, like, oh, what's on your face? What can people see? It's like, are you just stoic? Are you disassociating? Or are you really nervous? Are you really bothered? And I like taking those moments and kind of mapping them in a way. It's like, okay, they're feeling this sort of way, and just kind of always being observing, always kind of keeping an eye on it. So depending on how they react to the world and proactively engage, that's when you can kind of map where they, even if they're more mechanically minded, it's like, I want to focus on this move. I think, Alexis, you said it earlier, but just like putting some like tidbits there that people want to grab and engage with.
Yeah.
And you have an arc in mind. I think it's always just good to have an idea, but it's always like, have it kind of be like a cone. You start out small and then you can go to so many different places, and just having an idea of where it could go. Because one of my favorite things is just being surprised with how people react, and having those arcs, making sure that you can prompt moments. It doesn't always, and then you can reference decisions, you can reference those states of being, because then that also refreshes in players' minds like where they were at the time when this thing happened.
Yeah.
And showing any sort of change to that status quo, I think, is meaningful for that character arc.
Yeah, anytime a player you feel like you're like, oh, I'm a different person. I have different values. I have different ideas than I did at the start of this is huge, you know, because a lot of games don't really prompt that. And like you play a character for years and you're like, they're still the same person. And it's like, what? Yeah. I love seeing character growth. That's
and one easy, as a player, one easy metric is if your smitten question, if it's not hitting you as hard as it did. If it's like, oh, I don't think that, like, let me go back to the infamous real quick. It's, why do you think they would be wrong to forgive you? And then if you get to the point with your character, I'm like, they wouldn't be wrong. Then you're like, oh, then maybe it's time.
Yeah.
Like, maybe it's time to switch playbooks. Maybe it's time to do like, or approach like, or give a problem or challenge that they have an opportunity to handle in a different way, to have that like self-actualization. So I think I just hammer on Smitten. Smitten is such a guiding light from beginning to end, and it's such a good barometer and temperature check for how your players are engaging with the world and how they're changing their perspective on it.
I love it. What about you, Alexis? What's your?
Yeah. So I think every single playbook has a specific mechanic for it, right? So great examples are Curiosity on the Nature Witch and Reputation Precedes Me on the Bloody from Advanced Lovers and Lesbians.
Oh, yeah.
These are really great mechanics to have as an example, as like the game informs a character arc already through the mechanics, right? Like the Nature Witch is building up these experiences, and you're getting to build the character arc by using the trials that are already written and stuff. You can lean into that to start building a good character arc, because they're juicy. April did a great job making great mechanics, and so did Aaron on the Bloody, and everyone on all the Advanced Lovers and Lesbian playbooks. These playbook mechanics really do give you something to build great character arcs in, right? So, Reputation Precedes Me has these scars and these victories, right? So you're going on the Bloody, you're kind of building in an arc where you're getting this story and you're getting this drama and you're building to something. And it's going to feel great because you're getting mechanically rewarded for filling this arc too, or the Chosen, right? Like, you're getting mechanically rewarded, and that feels good. That's that little ping sensation. Number went up. Thing is happening. I'm tallying. If you can feel the progression, look through the numbers, so it helps if you have a more analytical brain. But also it's a thing on your sheet when you come back that week. You go, oh yeah, I did mark this, or my feral has been up lately. I have noticed that as a beast, I have been more feral, and I think now I'm learning that I'm going to lean into the feral, and when I play book change, I'm going to be a beast all the time, baby. I'm, right? So leaning into that, using the core mechanic as a tool to tell the story arc, and as the GM, check in on their sheets, like, have the open sheets, have them online, be like, hey, everyone, share your sheets with me, and as you progress, mark them so I can look at what's happening with you.
Yeah.
It's a great way to build those mechanics. And then strings, not just min, but the strings in general are a great tool, right? Like, here's the characters you met, bring them back. Make sure that those characters that you got a string with, they come back. That's going to make that character feel really satisfied. Even if they come back for like the dramatic moment, and you're maybe it's like a playbook change moment. Like, that you're coming into the session, you're going to change playbooks. It's going to be this epic moment where you say, like, fuck you to your dad that runs the patriarchal society. Is a big moment, and then you bring back these characters they met and affected along the way. That's going to make like this amazing character moment where they're here to help them now, right? Like, you were helping them, and now they're back to help you.
Oh yeah,
those are like some of the most fulfilling moments where it's like, it's that guy. It's them from the inn.
It's them. I remember. Yeah. Well, it's always so satisfying when you, as a player, feel like you're affecting the world, and you're like, oh, the thing I offered is been seen, has been incorporated. That's a great way to see the world changing by what you've done.
Yeah, to Alexis's point, like the playbooks, I like to often playbooks being conflated with like a character sheet, because really a playbook is a snapshot in time of your character. Like, and we talk a lot about switching playbooks because like that's a different character arc in a different part of your life. Like we are not the same people we were 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago. So yeah, always getting to, I think, focusing on like what your character wants and what they're willing to do for it or not do for it can really just make interesting ways to then look forward to what playbook you might interest you next, or be surprised yourself of what they might become.
I love it. All right, I think we're getting to our last question, which was given by Lily. So I think this is a great one because custom moves are in lots of PBTA games, but I think that they're kind of like, for a lot of games, they're kind of like, and you can make a custom move, and they're just sort of like, either the book text doesn't present them particularly boldly, or the play culture just doesn't necessarily embrace them. But I think TSL really does embrace custom moves, and Lily, what's your thoughts on using them?
I love custom moves. I love so like the moves, like the basic moves, and like the moves that are sort of in the game in general are great for like the overall tone and like what is important to do and what is cool and big and important in a TSL game. When you are like, if you have like a setting that you're running and you're like super excited about it and you're like coming up with cool stuff, I view custom moves as a way to really hammer that point home, or really highlight like, oh, in this setting, like as an example from like the settings that are in the book, like there's the chess one where like there's a whole custom move and like a whole different thing for like, oh, I made a really good chess move, and it's like, like they're like, if your setting doesn't use swords, it uses something else, you can make a custom move around that. And like it's about like reinforcing themes. Like if like if you're in a space setting and like doing a space jump or something is like, you really want to explore that like loneliness of space or something like that, like make a custom move of like, oh, if we get a downbeat, we might end up like lost in space and we need to figure that out or something. Like it's about like finding what you really want to hammer in on, like a setting or themes, and it gives you mechanical and narrative and like benefits to let the players engage with that too. And I think it also helps you, like, what's cool is doing that, you're a game designer now. Congrats.
True.
Like
totally.
Like you're like hacking on this game, you're like helping change it and like make it your own thing. And like making it more personal for the players, and like when the players get to do it, like that's, I love when I get to read a custom move and like roll it and do it. Like it feels so cool, and just like it feels a lot more engaging with the setting. I would say like my tips are, don't go overboard. Don't come to the table with like, hey, here's my 20 custom moves, like, because that's just going to be way overwhelming for everybody.
Right.
Like, and you're going to have to like that might be your special interest, and you're like, I remember all of these word for word, but not everybody's going to be able to. So like I would advise, like, if something comes up a few times and you're like, it would be really cool to have like a thing for this when it happens, that's a great place for a custom move. Or like when you're making the setting, if you keep coming back to like, this thing I really want to do, like entering a ball is something that we're going to be doing all the time, and I want a custom move for entering the ball and what happens when you are seen by the whole court or something like that. Like, don't go overboard, keep them tight and keep them juicy. Like, make sure you have downbeats for them, because downbeats are juicy and great, and like make sure you have things that like when you succeed at it, it's cool, and when you don't succeed at it, it's going to move the story along in a really cool and fun way. And yeah, like you can put custom move, like a love letter is like a custom move. So like if you want to be like, you were talking to this person and trying to start a community farm, how's that going? Like that can be a custom move. Like roll to see how that's been going. So yeah, find ways to fit them in. Don't go overboard, but make them like focused and tight and juicy, I think is my like the thing that I really like to focus on when I'm doing custom moves and thinking about them.
Do you recall one that you've used or that you've seen that you love in particular? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. If not, no worries.
I
just thought
just looking up notes from old games to see if I could find one that I could mention.
Nice.
Let me look through more because I don't have enough for like the very top of my head.
I'm gonna pop to Alexis
Okay.
and see
If
her
I find
thoughts
a
on it.
juicy
And if
one,
you think
yeah.
of one, yeah. Alexis, what's your take on custom moves?
Yeah. I'm in a unique position in that every time I have a new custom move that I like, I message April and I'm like, do we put it in the next thing? So
Nice.
so technically, like so that happens a lot. But it's but it's like I think the best thing to make like a compelling custom move is that it fits the setting or it fits the drama, it fits the table's tone. Like I think about Connect in the as a custom move that's in the book, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where it's like, hey, this I'm not really like gonna get smitten. I don't really like I'm Ace Arrow. I don't really or I'm just not interested in romance right now. Like I'm just I went over a bad breakup. I don't want to do it. I still want to play TSL with everyone else. But I would really like a move that like doesn't feel like romantic leaning. Right. So you look at Connect and it fits that like tone really well. And so I think about Connect, I think about like right, like that's something that like I right away, right when I was playing TSL, something I or it feels like it fits a niche that like, oh, like the game doesn't hit this niche, but I really want to explore this. So like I came up with this thing called Falling Deeper, and it's that was a mechanic that was like a after smitten kind of continuing to follow a relationship. And like this is like the moment in which you're like, oh wait, like it's not just a crush. I think I'm actually like in love.
Yeah.
Right. Like and in that moment, because I wanted to have like the relationship, like I was like, I really want something to signal like this has gone from, oh, they're so hot to like, wow.
Yeah. I really want them in my life. Like
I want them in my life. I want this person. So like, right. So I fit a need that you have. Lily, did you find something juicy?
I did. I found one. So
nice.
This was in a game where we had a sort of like god-like entity that was sort of the like representation of like information and gathering it and like keeping it. They like there's a bunch of cults that were like spy cults that were like underneath them, and I had a sort of like head priestess of this goddess, and they had a power that was given to them that basically was I'll just read it to give the vibe. When the conspiratrix gazes upon you with the mark of the lore keeper to discover your secrets, roll plus spirit. A miss may find you giving up more than just your own secrets.
Nice.
And then, so on an upbeat, it actually flips it. So like you resisted and the connection that this person is trying to make with you is too much and you learn something about them and the cults. Mm-hmm. So like, it's a good thing to like try to focus and like really resist and get this upbeat to learn more and like get more information about it. But then on a mixed beat or a downbeat, you might have to tell Obscura one of your true feelings towards one of your party members. Tell her something that would bring harm if it got out. I also I like to, if someone like, because some people, that's like their bread and butter. That's like my like I want to tell everybody my secrets.
Yeah.
Some people that's like, I don't know, I kind of want to keep them close and like I want to feel like I was able to at least hold something back. I also put in a choice for market condition as you're like tightening up and like forcing yourself to not reveal things. Like it still like hits you and you still have to like put in some like resources and effort to really hide them. But if you're like a person that's like, I don't really want to mention this right now, like,
yeah,
you don't have to. So like, I like to give options and things in my custom moves too. Like I love the ones that are like, choose 2 on a mixed beat or choose all of them occur on a like downbeat or something like that. So yeah, that's one of them. That was a really juicy one that I liked about this like character that can like pierce in and like explicitly see secrets and like
Mhm.
gather them and like hold them close. So yeah, I thought that one was really fun and juicy.
I love that you put my true feelings about one of my party members and information that could cause great harm if it was came out at the same level, right? Like those are equally those are usually like precious, dangerous kind of
Exactly.
things. So I think
Yes.
that's such a delightful juxtaposition there. That's so good. Well, friends, thank you so much. This was an absolute delight. We're gonna wrap up. If you are one of the if you backed at the backstage pass level and you're one of the VIP levels, you should have an email, or you should both have an email and have a and in Moonbeam itself, there's a link to the fireside chat, which we're gonna wrap up, and then we'll be over there in like we're gonna give ourselves a couple minutes because we can do our own little check-ins and bio breaks and all that stuff. But we'll be over there shortly. But as we roll out, let's say our outro. So let's do it in the opposite order this time. So Anthony, you want to tell us where we can find you and what you're up to these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not on social media as much anymore, but you can find me at Barkada XP, and you can find my itch page through that as well. I'm on Twitter and Blue Sky and itch. Those are probably the main things I'm on. But I'm working on a couple things that I can't announce yet. So just keep an eye out. That I will pop back in and say, hey, everybody, is anyone still here?
Nice. Exciting. How about you, Alexis? What's going on with you?
I am keeping myself very busy. I'm working on a lot of stuff. You can find me at Alexis Sarah on Blue Sky and Tumblr. On Tumblr, it's more like my articles, more freeform. But if you want to see my just thoughts, then Blue Sky is the place to go. And I am working on a lot of projects. I'm working on a novel. It's on my Patreon, patreon.com/Alexis Sarah. I'm Alexis Sarah everywhere, baby. And I have like a rough draft up for patrons at a $5 plus level. I'm working on an expansion to this game with April called Falling Deeper. It's going to be fucking great. Working with April's fantastic. April's one of my best friends, so I just love working with her. I'm working with my girlfriend Erin on a game called Nerve Cyberpunk. It's it's a more tactical game, so if you want like something with more crunch, it's going to be really fun and juicy, and it sounds like a lot of really fun places for role play and expression because I'm not normally a tactical girl, but I like play. I play tested. I was like, whoa, I actually had fun. I really liked it. She did a great job, and she's I am Noxie on Blue Sky if you want to see her. And I'm working with another girlfriend on a game called True Selves, which is kind of like PBTA inspired, and it's fun and it's great. And I'm working on a bunch of other things, which you can hear me talk about on Blue Sky. I don't want to talk too much and take away time from Lily, so I will stop. I'll cut myself off.
Very exciting stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you, Lily? What's going on?
Yeah. So I'm no longer on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky at Lilypad Nebula. I'm on the Fediverse Activity Pub Mastodon stuff. I'm Lilypad Nebula at transfem.social. Trying to be more active there and stuff. But yeah, things I'm currently working on. I have a playbook that is sort of in a I want to make it a little more polished and get some art for it place, but the text I'm pretty good with, called The Diamond. That's on my itch page. It's definitely not a trans allegory. I don't know what you're talking about. But it is about having found a cool new power and people trying to decide who you are for you, and you trying to find your place within that. So yeah, definitely not a trans allegory. I'm also working on a TSL setting called Lila Lickham's Candy Co-op, which is a sort of Willy Wonka meets Delicious and Dungeon, where there's going to be a bunch of candy things and critters that you go in and have transformation elements and different stuff to explore. And yeah, I'm really happy with where that is. I demoed it at Big Bad Con this year and got a lot of really good feedback. So yeah, working on those things that will be on Blue Sky and stuff, and itch is where I'll put everything. So yeah, I'm on itch.io as Lilypad Nebula as well.
Wonderful.
The diamond is there in a rough draft if you want to take a look at it.
Sweet. We'll make sure to get all your after the show. I'll get all your socials and we'll put them up on the Dice Pool site as well. So if you are watching this and you're like, oh, that went by too fast, we'll get these all linked in various places. Cool. Thank you so much, everyone. That was fantastic advice. Everyone in chat, thanks for watching and hanging out with us. And we're gonna wrap this up and we'll jump to the fireside chat in a little bit. So thanks all. See you soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.